New Buddha-ware Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to continue with what we were talking about last Sunday. Today's talk can also be a standalone. I'll remind you what we were talking about. Today we want to take it a little bit more into the practical side by doing something rather than just talking about it, which actually is the theme of the talk. I coined the word think-ism. Think-ism is when we have unwanted thoughts or just unwanted thinking. We're thinking too much. I have met people who say, well, I'm quite happy, but I can't seem to stop my mind thinking. It just goes on and on. So trying to get to sleep and lots of thoughts running through, and then one bumps into one which is perhaps a little bit unpleasant, and that might keep one awake. So now there's nothing wrong with thinking. What is thinking generally? Generally, thinking is verbalizing or conceiving. That is, it is putting thoughts into one's mind which relate basically to a language. So we think in a particular language. But it's more complicated than that. It's very fuzzy, in fact. We get images and so on. But thinking generally, just speaking very generally, is verbalizing. That's putting things into words. Now, since we live in a civilization which is absolutely constructed on manipulation of what he calls information, there's a danger that we get sunk into thinking, as though thinking is a kind of paradigm of what we should be doing. Of course, there are sort of action painters, for example, like Jackson Pollock, who used to just throw the paint at the screen, at the canvas. Some of you may have seen his paintings. They don't look like anything. But in a way, it serves my purpose quite well, because when we come back to thinking, what would be the alternative to it? Now, first of all, thinking is not always a bad thing. We can't do without it. It's only a bad thing when we get attached to it or get fixated on it, or when we want to stop thinking, but we can't. So that's what we're dealing with here, because we need to let go of the things that come into our minds, and a lot of thinking going on. I think we all have that experience of not being able to drop off to sleep because of thinking going on a bit too much. So I think the main theme of last week was the difference between experiencing something or being with that thing as opposed to thinking about it. So, thinking about ice cream is not the same thing as tasting ice cream, obviously. But actually, it's not that obvious, because we do tend to confuse the two. Is it possible to relate to something or to be with it without thinking about it? It's a good question. Just to rest in it or be with it? Well, let's look at what thinking is generally trying to achieve in the mind that won't stop. This is thinking in itself. This is what we might call meta thinking, because it's thinking about thinking. But anyway, first of all, we try to achieve explanation. We want to explain something. So the mind comes across something a little unusual, perhaps, or a usual thing that is behaving unusually. We want an explanation. That is, we want to know how it came about, right? So we want to know the causes and the effects. So there's a lot of that going on in our society due to the predominance of science, or what we call science, or I'd rather call it scientism. So a lot of thinking is about trying to explain something, even when we don't need to explain it, because explaining can get in the way of just appreciating something or just being with it. Okay. Then another portion of thinking is describing. That is, putting into words what it is like, what its qualities are, its color, its shape, perhaps, the volume of sound. All of this is describing it. It's as though we're trying to turn the thing into a list of nouns and adjectives. So I've got something here which was given to me by my sister, Linda, as a present, because I use it as a bookend. And what it is a piece of crystalline material that on one side you can see is just a rock. On the other side it's been sliced through, and you've got this beautiful greenish pattern on it. Right. Now, you see how I'm converting it into words by telling you what it is? Right. Can I stop doing that? Can I just be with it and not start the process of explaining it? So the explanation could be, oh, it's very interesting, because this is rock, which is called, I don't know, magnetite or something, which was during a volcanic eruption at very high temperature. It's the rock has melted, and it's got various metals in it, like titanium or iron or whatever. All of that is what? That's an explanation of what it is. Right. Another explanation would be, what do you do with it? Well, that's looking for a use. We're always looking for a use for something. We were talking about this earlier on. Does it have a use? Why would my sister give it to me? Well, it's attractive, but actually it's intended as a bookend. And there is another one. There's the other half, or the other quarter rather, been cut off. So I can put it on either side of a row of books. My sister knows very well how I am with books. So it becomes a bookend. Put the books along there, and it's pretty heavy. Okay. So what am I doing now? I'm describing it. Now I'm starting to think. I'm manipulating it. What can I do with it? Is there any point in it? Apparently, if there's no use for it, then I don't need it at all. We were talking about this earlier with the phenomenon of hoarding. What is that about? Okay, things become familiar. When they become familiar, I start to feel cozy with them, and I like to see them around. So, this is kind of around with me, because what I use this for, actually, if you're interested, is holding back a cable that comes into the computer, because it's quite heavy, so it'll hold the cable back. Okay, but what I'm doing there is thinking. I'm thinking in terms of its use. The other thing I can do is judgment, is thinking. Is it good? Is it bad? Will it hurt me or not? Is it attractive or not? Do I prefer this greenish color to, say, an orange color? All this is judgmental. So if I say, well, it's rather too big and heavy, that's a judgment. All of this is going through my head. Meanwhile, this thing is just sitting there, and all of this is going on in my head. It's got very little to do with the experience of it, that it's just there. Okay, so explain, use, judgment, description. The size of it, the weight of it, the shape of it, and how, from more perceiving sort of person, how the shape changes with movement. Could be very fascinating for an artist, maybe an abstract artist. Okay, but again, I'm thinking about what I can transform it into. Now, why can't we just leave things alone? Why can't we just take things as they are? Why can't we just say, all right, whoa, yeah, hello. Don't get beyond the hello, right? Just hello. Right. Now, there's an experience going on, which in fancy language we call seeing it as a phenomenon. That is, we're not explaining it. It's the sensation or the impression of it. the experience of it. I don't have to give it any words, I just experience it. Now, this is quite useful when it comes to letting go of thinking, which we'll come back to in a moment. So, are you getting an idea of what thinking is? Because we have to, in Buddhism, so often we have to stand outside our own thinking, our own feeling, our own responses. So we are, in a sense, I suppose, setting up a new explanation or description of what we're doing, but maybe one that is more helpful, hopefully. Although, by the way, mindfulness can go wrong. But we'll talk about that on another occasion. Okay, explain, describe, judge, use, etc. Now, contrasting that with the difference between a phenomenal response to something and thinking about it. So with taste, for example, it's very obvious to us that the taste is something in its own world. By adding an adjective such as salty taste, now I'm giving it a word, salty, and now that saltiness, where is that? It's in my head. But I don't notice that, but I would say the saltiness is in the thing. But no person to perceive it, then no saltiness. Saltiness comes up with our mental responses to things. Okay, so when you are practicing mindfulness, very often we need just a little bit more awareness of, especially when we're being troubled by, say, thinking too much, that this is all going on in the mind. One way we can divert it is by taking it away from the mind. So let's go to that. Okay. Now, there was a time in Theravada Buddhism when they had quite a good technique, which for some reason they've dropped. And that was for something called a kasina. Kasina, kasina. Kasina was an object that you used for meditation. Now, kasina could be one of the four elements, earth, wind, fire, whatever it was. And as strange as it may sound, the monk or the nun would put a little pot of water, say water, in front of them. And they would just gaze at the water and not move their gaze from the water. They were letting go of the thinking about it as water. Water? No water. Just this experience here and now. No water. That is no water in our mind. No use of the word water. Now, if you can do that to some extent, everything starts to seem a little bit novel and strange in a way, which we've got used to because we keep attaching labels to everything. We want to label everything. So many labels that we can't seem to function without all these labels. But let's think about this kasina thing. I have previously recommended that you use a kasina. At least try it and see how it goes. And we tried it out at the Quiet Center at the university. And I brought a big pot of pebbles. And everybody selected their own pebble, which worked very well. But they were then surprised when I said, just put the pebble on your hand and look at the pebble. First time around, they had so many explanations of how the pebble was formed and which one they liked and why they liked it. Second time around, I said, well, now don't do that. just look at the pebble, the sensation of the pebble, the phenomenon of the pebble being there. Okay. So they liked that very much, actually, because they could see that thinking could come under their control. The thinking was a process they were attaching to, the process of attachment. I can stop doing that. It's difficult at first because we don't normally do that, except when something is very new or surprising. If I were to see, a huge bird out there, sort of with orange and blue, with a big crest on his head. I would think, what? You know, I would be lost for words. Interesting phrase, isn't it? Lost for words. You see, I can't explain, describe it. So I'm just, Now that reaction is very interesting. That's at the root of everything. We react. And of course, we react sometimes with anger. We react with love. We react. But how often do we just stand back and say, okay, let's just be with things as they are, being with, not trying to categorize or classify. So one thing you can do is get a little pebble. You find one somewhere, or if you can't find one, then you can go down to the beach and get one, or you could go to a garden centre and buy a whole pot of pebbles. I seem to have forgotten to do this the last couple of years, but it's quite effective, and it makes people laugh. But they do get the point. You get the point here. The thinking is in your mind. It's not anywhere else. The thinking about the pebble is not in the pebble. It's in your mind. In a sense, there is no such thing as a pebble. A pebble is a mental construct. There is something, I suppose, but in the higher reaches of Mahayana Buddhism, they will say that everything is the same. It's all identical. At bottom, all things are one. So there is no pebble, because that would make it a separate thing. Okay. We'll go into that in the root session. Okay, so I think you've got the point there. So we're now thinking about how we can move on when thinking becomes an attachment. And we have the delusion that thinking can solve all our problems. It doesn't seem to occur to us, I don't know why, that thinking has caused the problem in the first place. So can we rely on thinking? Why not sometimes at least just take things as they are and don't try to explain it or describe it or judge it? Judgment is going on all the time. We judge each other, for example. You know, where's the judgment? The judgment is in my mind. It's not in the person that I'm judging. Okay, so number one method, the Kasina method. Find yourself. It doesn't have to, by the way, it doesn't have to be a pebble. It could be anything. Put something convenient that every so often you can just give your mind a rest by saying, I'm just going to be with this object. You don't even have to see it as an object, but it takes time to get to that point. Okay, then there's breathing. Now we all know about that because this is hammered quite a bit. But it's probably the single most effective and simple way of letting go of thinking. Why? Because breathing is with you all the time. The pebble, as you will have noticed, comes and goes. Your breathing, if your breathing is gone, then you have gone, you're dead, right? So the breathing is always there. So you've always got a meditation object with you all the time, as long as you're alive. That's very convenient, isn't it? You didn't have to pay for it. So instead of the pebble, the motion of the breathing becomes your object. Divert it away from thinking. So the instruction is to pay attention to each in-breath when it is an in-breath, to each out-breath when it is an out-breath. Don't judge it, don't explain it, don't think about what use you can put it to, obviously. So what you're doing, and this of course is concentration, concentrating the mind, and if you concentrate successfully, it will let go of other things. It will let go of the thinking, let go of fear, for example. You know, sometimes I get a bit worried about what the dentist is getting up to in my mouth. I say, okay, just trust her. Just focus on the breathing. I focus on my own breathing. And it does help a lot. That's the most effective one we've got. Some people like using a casino. Why not? I don't know why it's dropped out of the Theravadas practice. Walking meditation, also very good. But again, you're not really thinking about walking somewhere. You're not trying to describe, well, you can start the walk by saying, what beautiful place, nice trees, that's an oak tree, that's a lime tree, that's a chestnut tree, etc. Now you're still thinking, but at least it's a bit more soothing, if you like, than what you're normally used to thinking about, which is probably something to do with money or work or colleagues that you can't get on with. So that's okay. But a point comes where you just need to let go of trying to categorize things and explain them. So a point comes where you don't need to say chestnut tree, lime tree, rowan tree. What exactly is the point of this? Why not just see it as it is, something that you are being with? The tree is being, you are being. You and the tree are being. For a moment, you're being together. That's all. That's it. It's so soothing. It's so obvious, and it's so relaxing. Lucinda, your name has just come up on the screen. I'm not sure why. Oh, okay. Can I carry on? Yes. Yes. Right. Okay. Yes. So breathing is a good one. Now, when you're breathing, what you're trying to do is stay with the motion of the breathing. You put your mind onto the motion of the breathing. In breath, out breath. But you're not. You could start by saying in breath, out breath, but then you have to let that go, and you are just being the in breath and the out breath. After all, what is that breathing doing there in myself? Where did it come from? It's me. Pretty obvious, really, isn't it? So why the hell do we need to start describing it or whatever when it is me in the first place? Okay, walking. If you look at the book, I make a distinction between walking meditation and going for a walk. Going for a walk is very, very good to bring you down to a level at which you can do true walking meditation, which is just observing the motion of the body, right? But not calling it body, or not saying to yourself, "I am what," but you are aware of what it is that you're doing. So you're in that moment with the motion. Now, you might not want on a weekend to be doing that all the time, but you can switch back and forth between going for a walk and, more strictly speaking, walking meditation. Okay, finally, the sky. You know what that is, I guess, but it's not an object, is it? It's there all the time. Things that are there all the time, very useful as objects of meditation to take us away from worries and attachments. So I tend to do this most mornings. I will just look at the sky. Sometimes the sky is blue, sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's full of clouds, sometimes it isn't, but I am not describing the sky. I am, in a sense, it sounds silly, but I'm being with the sky. It's as though, to put it more graphically, it's as though I were just sailing in the sky. I'm up there sailing in the sky, but I'm not thinking very much. I'm just being with it. I know that sounds strange at first, but try it. Just to be with the sky, be with the clouds. Not saying to yourself, oh, that's what they call a cumulus cloud, or that's a cirrus cloud. Yeah, very, very great. Very, very clever of you, but it's not meditation. That's something to do with weather reports or something, I think. So, it's very powerful because the sky, what is the sky? What are we calling the sky? We're not talking about the atmosphere. That's getting too technical. We're just talking about that. So we just rest in it. And it's like you can correlate that with the mind creating this infinite space, the infinite sky, the infinite space, the infinite mind. They all go together. So sometimes look at the sky, but not in order to see whether it's going to rain or not. See it as it is. The sky doesn't care a damn what you think about it. Should be pretty obvious, really. Okay, so sky sailing. Give it a try. Next time you go for a walk, or next time you don't go for a walk, you can look out through the window, stick your head out the window, and do some sky sailing. And just be careful you don't fall out. Because that you might need to explain that. All right, so I think I've said what I wanted to say. I hope it gives you food for thought, but useful thought about how you're going to drop thought when you need to drop it. Okay. Thank you very much for listening.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.